I need everyone listening to just pause with me for a second. Because last night, the Chicago Bears beat the Green Bay Packers in overtime in one of the most insane, emotional, holy, you can't make this up finishes we've seen in this city in years. Down, written off, playoffs on the line, NFC North on the line, and they ripped it straight out of Green Bay's hands. That wasn't just a win, that was a statement. The Bears are now firmly on a path to win the NFC North. Let that sit. This team is no longer interesting. They're no longer ahead of schedule. They're no longer playing meaningless games. They are controlling their own destiny. The Ben Johnson effect is real. This doesn't feel like 2018. This feels sustainable. This feels built, not borrowed. And yet, less than 48 hours before that moment, Kevin Warren dropped a letter that detonated Bears fandom. A letter that said the quiet part out loud. The Chicago Bears may leave the state of Illinois. And here's why this matters even more after last night. This isn't a rebuilding team anymore. This isn't a maybe someday product. This is a team peaking at the exact moment the business side is unraveling. Bears fans are riding the highest high we've had in years. And suddenly we're being asked to imagine watching this team play home games in Indiana. But before we get emotional, before we start pointing fingers, we need to slow this down and actually walk through how this has been handled step by step. Because a lot of the outrage right now is rooted in information that is either incomplete or flat out wrong. And that's why I want to do this episode now. Okay, after the Packers game, before the timing didn't ruin the football, or because the timing didn't ruin the football moment, it exposed exactly how serious this actually is. So again, this is the Hallis Huddle. Guys, just to preface this, I have a property tax background. That's why a lot of this information that I have is going to be prefaced on my experience. I've done this for over 10 years. I have direct contacts regarding the stadium itself, regarding the property tax issues at hand. But for us to do this, we kind of just have to kind of go back. We got to go chronologically in order. So again, this is the Hallis Huddle. Go hit that subscribe button. I know the stadium topic isn't something that everyone loves to hear about, but I think it's important. I think it's definitely something we need to mention. And I know Bob and Justin did a really good job, but I wasn't able to be on that episode. And because of my background, articles that I've written in the past, it was something I felt like I needed to touch on once again.
Well, let me jump in right there. Justin and I did react more from a fan perspective and how, it's going to affect people who watch the games on TV, not so much. Maybe it'll affect people who go to the games a lot. And, that's just mine and Justin's role. But I mean, Rob, you, like I said, you are in the tax industry, the property tax industry. And a lot of the information you're about to provide for us is real sourced information from people actually in the know. Obviously, we're not revealing sources, but This is real information that here on the Hallis Huddle we're very excited to let everybody know about.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of this stuff is public information because property taxes are public. It's just a lot of times people don't fully understand or grasp everything that goes on, especially in the behind the scenes, negotiations that take place. But in reality, this whole mess really starts back in 2002, 2003 with the Soldier Field reconstruction, right? A $632 million project that was supposed to modernize the stadium while preserving its historic exterior. Well, we all know how that turned out, right? Capacity went down, functionality suffered. They ended up losing their historic site status. The Bears don't own their stadium. And visually, I mean, people are still arguing whether it looks like a stadium or a UFO, right?
So this is one thing about, obviously, I don't like the renovation that was done back then. But we see the difficulties that Kevin Warren seems to be having now. And it appears that what Ted Phillips was able to accomplish was basically just, being on the losing end of every single compromise. And that was basically the best that he could do. So now you see, whatever job you think Kevin Warren is or isn't doing, it appears that he's at least trying to fight a tougher fight than Ted Phillips put up back in 2003.
Yeah, and he's had historic success being a part of the Minnesota Vikings when they got their new stadium. And US Bank Stadium is like one of the best stadiums that are available right now. Like, people love that stadium, especially from a media standpoint, but people love that stadium. And I'll mention them briefly when we get to a part here with the situation, because look, this is the part that fans really need to understand, right? So at the time, the Chicago Bears and the NFL, they paid roughly $200 million of that $632 million project. Okay. They paid that share off very early in the process. That remaining cost, that fell to the public through bonds, right? Issued to the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, backed by a Chicago hotel tax, a 2% tax that was supposed to help pay off those bonds. But now, because of how those bonds were structured, and let's not even talk about it, they were refinanced multiple times. Over $500 million is still owed today. We're talking 20 years later. The key point here is, look, the Bears do not owe that money. They never did. They're tenants. The Chicago Park District is the landlord. The city owns the stadium. Yet fans keep hearing, subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, from Governor J.B. Pritzker and other state leaders that the Bears somehow need to take responsibility for this debt. That framing is horribly misleading. Horribly misleading. And I am one of those people, look, you do not, billionaires, I'm not here to help you out, right? Like, I'm just not. You need to pay your taxes, a fair share of those taxes. I'm on board with that, 100%. There's no reason that they should not have fiscal responsibility. But we're also talking about fairness. The Bears had you just mentioned it. The Bears, Ted Phillips signed up for an awful deal. They should not be being punished even more because of the fact that Illinois mishandled everything. And again, so they mishandled the financing. Like, the Bears are being blamed for a deal. They already paid their share off decades ago. The misrepresentation sets the tone for everything that follows. Everything that follows. Minnesota Vikings, they paid off their bonds over 20 years early. Now, it's not completely done. There's still some things that are being paid up there, but it's majority of those bonds. I mean, the bonds themselves are paid off, and then there's just some other, lingering things that are taking place. But it's
now, when you say the Vikings paid off their bonds, or the Minnesota government paid off their bonds?
The Minnesota government.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. The Vikings, whatever bonds were issued to help finance that stadium, the government, it's all been cleared and free. And here in Chicago, we actually owe more than we did when the project started.
Like, how? Yeah. How? And then you're trying to hold them hostage, right? You're trying to hold them hostage in the stadium until 2032 is when their lease expires. 2033, boom, you got to find a new place to go or find a new lease that you have to sign with the park district. Like, you're just going to hold them hostage because you mishandled it and you think you haven't paid that down in 20 years. It is, the principal and interest has now expanded. You owe more than what you owed in the beginning. And you think, what, 5-6 years is going to make a difference? Now all of a sudden you're going to pay that down? I'm sorry. Like, you're not. And I know Pritzker wasn't involved when all of that took place in 2021. He inherited that mess. Look, I don't like to be political on here. I'm not down on J.B. Pritzker overall as a politician. I just think he's being a shitty politician in this regard because he's misrepresenting the situation at hand to try to make himself look better. Something else that I'll bring up here in a little bit as we move on. So let's go back. Okay, so we were 2002, 2003. That situation kind of set everything up for where we're going now. Now let's jump up ahead to 2021. Okay, the Bears submit a bid, $197.2 million bid for the Arlington Park racetrack property that used to be the horse racing track, right? Important details here, okay? A purchase agreement is not a closed sale. You need to listen to this again. A purchase agreement is not a closed sale. If you ever bought or sold a house and you sign a purchase agreement, things happen during that time. Inspections take place. Things happen. Maybe your loan, your ability to get that loan falls through. There are many things that can take place between a purchase agreement and closing on a property. That is a house. Okay. Now expand that to a commercial property. There is so much involved. There were so many site development surveys and things that they had to go through to determine, is this something that we truly, truly want? Okay.
So what you're saying is, when the first announcement the Bears are going to buy the Arlington Park racetrack back in, was it 2020?
2021 is June 2021. They placed their bids. September 2021 is when they got the announcement that they won.
Right. And again, that wasn't them buying the property. That was them just agreeing with the Churchill Downs that we want to be the buyer. And now we have a whole nother process to go through before we can actually close.
100% correct. Okay. 100% correct. Another important detail to piggyback off of that, they did not close on that property until January 31st of 2023. So you're talking September 2021 all the way to January 31st of 2023. And this matters. And this is where the property tax stuff comes in. I'm going to keep it as simple as I can so it's not boring to people, right? The reason that this matters is because every year a property is valued based on what is the lien date. In Illinois, the lien date is January 1st of that year, okay? Now, Cook County operates on what's called a triennial reassessment cycle. Every 3 years, properties are reassessed, okay? They split it up where you have different different townships are valued or revalued in different years so that they're not taking on that capacity of doing every single property every single year. So it staggers. But this property falls in Palatine Township. It was supposed to be revalued in 2022. Okay. So 2021, it was valued at $33 million. Okay. $33 million. 2022, revaluation year. Fritz Kagi, fairly new as the Cook County assessor. This is his first swing at actually revaluing the Palatine Township. He comes in. He suddenly revalues that property at $197 million. Where did he get that number from, guys? It's simple, right? He used the Chicago Bears bid, a bid number that was publicly announced, but wasn't closed on until a full calendar year plus a month, right? 31 days, a full calendar year and 31 days it took for that to close. And he went and chased that bid. But here's the thing. Not only is that sale chasing, it wasn't even a sale yet. Assessors by law are not supposed to do it in Illinois. There are laws and statutes set up so that they are not supposed to go do those things. You're supposed to value properties based on the market as a whole. Someone might argue, well, this is a very unique property, blah, 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 right? It was a piece of frickin' land with a vacant improvement building. Nothing changed. You cannot go from
you said the original
million.
33 million was after everything was demolished. It's just the 300 acres or whatever.
So no. The buildings were still in place.
Okay.
Right. So it was literally as Churchill Downs left it, bankrupt. Churchill Downs still owned it. Right. So they still owned it. They were the ones that had to actually go and appeal in 2022. I won't go into the appeal process. It's a drawn out process. There's many steps involved, many different entities, but they won. They got that valuation lowered. Okay. Fritz Kagi, the assessor that he is, which by the way, I'm not a fan of his. I said I was a fan of JB Pritzker. Overall, I am not a fan of Fritz Kagi. Fritz Kagi in a non-reassessment year, this is 2023, right? 2022, 23, 24. Those are supposed to be the 3 years locked in for that property. Now, there are things that can change values in non-reassessment years. I'm not going to get into those details. In this case, it doesn't make sense to this property because if anything, the value should have went down because they demolished the buildings, right? But what he did is in 2023, boom, he raised that back up to $197 million. And to make it worse, okay, to make an appeal even harder, he shifted that value from the improvements to the land for no freaking reason. That's what he did. It's not accidental. I mean, there was a reason. It wasn't accidental. It was a strategic move made by the county to make it more difficult and more expensive for the Chicago Bears and their attorneys to argue the value back down. But they did. They appealed. And again, they were successful. But the damage was done, right? The message was clear. There would not be any property tax certainty when it came to this project. And a project this size, not having tax certainty, it kills deals like this. This isn't like, if you look at the Chicago Bears as a business, right? You look at them as a business. If Amazon was to come in here, look, there were bids for Amazon to come to Chicago, right? Chicago didn't win those bids. In order to lure those types of businesses in, the city, the local townships, they have to give incentives for them to come here versus going somewhere else. Why do they do this? Because it brings in revenue. It brings in property tax revenue. It brings in jobs. It brings in economic growth, right? A little bit more on the economic growth later when it comes to stadiums. For those of you who are listening and saying, well, there is no economic growth, economists say stadiums usually don't bring any value in, no matter what their projections say. I call bullshit on this one, and I'll explain that one again in a little bit here. Okay. So Arlington Heights, they really lost the plot. Now the school districts, look, they saw dollar signs. Okay. This is instead of negotiating good faith, like municipalities usually do, time for massive commercial developments, they dug in. They had no flexibility in the beginning. They did not want to give a pilot program structure, which is basically payment in lieu of taxes. You come up with a number and you pay that amount for a set amount of time, 10, 20, 30 years. And what ends up happening is you use that money to reinvest into the property itself. You could even reinvest it. You could set that up so that you're paying part of those infrastructure costs that the Chicago Bears are asking taxpayer dollars for, right? You can set that up. There's many things that could have been done. Nothing was done. They were just like, look, undeveloped land shouldn't be taxed by a fully built revenue generating campus. But guess what? We don't care. We know what you paid for it. We're going to tax you on that, right? And the school districts would not budge. This wasn't about fairness. It was about squeezing every possible dollar immediately. And that's when Arlington Heights stopped being viable, right? It stopped being a viable option for the Bears. Kevin Warren, what did he do? He pivots back to Chicago, right? Looks at rebuilding Soldier Field, or actually building Soldier Field next to Soldier Field, right? And then we knew Friends of the Parks was going to come in, right? They threatened lawsuits. They caused the George Lucas museum to be pushed out of Chicago. He's like, screw this. I'm not dealing with these politics. He went back to Los Angeles. They expanded on park space. They literally expanded park space that was going to be available to schools, the inner city schools that do not have any of these park space available, that they were going to be able to come use this community availability of, baseball fields, soccer fields, all these things. Friends of the Parks didn't care. They're not Friends of the Parks. And you're not losing a sight line. Like, that's their whole thing. You're losing the sight line of the lake. Fuck that. You're not losing any sight line because Soldier Field is coming down and a new stadium is going up in its place. It's 1-to-1 ratio there. It makes zero sense. All they care about as a lobbyist group, they have a horrible rating, by the way, is money. That's all they care about. Yeah. Okay. So clearly that became an issue. Lori Lightfoot became an issue, but then Brendan Johnson's now the mayor. So you got two different mayors involved, a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiating. The Michael Reese Hospital site ended up becoming a very viable third option for them. One that they wouldn't have to deal with the park, Friends of the Parks as much, but it was still complicated. It was expensive. It would have put out some, I believe, some lower housing community people there. And that's something the Chicago Bears did not want to be a part of, right? And guess what? All of this still requires state involvement. This is just local city, Chicago. It still requires state involvement. You still need the state to fund infrastructure changes. Even at the Chicago Bears current site, infrastructure changes need to happen. Perfect example, Bob. You literally just Ubered to the game and you said it was awful getting there. Do you know how many fans complain about being able to get to the games, whether it's from public transit, whether it's from driving? The parking is bad. This is not
18 minutes to get to basically downtown from the northwest side, and another 30 minutes to get from a mile and a half out to the stadium.
I had the same issue trying to get to Real Madrid for AC Milan game, right? And it was a friendly matchup, but like it was here at Soldier Field, and same thing. I didn't get in until the 62nd minute. The soccer games are 90 minutes long.
That's gross.
It was awful.
Yeah.
So you got three sites. You got Arlington Heights, Soldier Field, Michael Reese. Those were like the main ones. Then they shift back to Arlington Heights throughout this process, speeding this up a little bit. Years go back and forth. No momentum, no commitment. Okay. Now, I mentioned it. This is where the economic argument gets lazy. People love citing studies saying stadiums don't help cities, but those studies analyze stadiums alone. This is not a stadium alone. This is a 300-acre mixed-use development. There is not a single property out there that you can compare this to that I can think of off the top of my head outside of SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. Okay? Inglewood was a city that was struggling. Horrible high unemployment. Over 17% unemployment in Inglewood prior to the SoFi Stadium development being done. Okay? Falling home values. On the verge of insolvency. They were going to be filing bankruptcy the way things were going. SoFi changed everything. Jobs came in. Tax base, infrastructure, community investment. That's the model the Bears are proposing. And guess what? Arlington Heights isn't struggling the same way Inglewood is. So you're literally just infusing more into a community that's already doing pretty well. So this isn't a dome dropped into a parking lot. Like, stop pretending it's the same thing. It's not. It's just not. Now,
specifically, we're talking about economic investment from the state into the community. I mean, it's for the infrastructure part, even as well, which is not privatized stuff. That's public utilities.
You and I cannot just decide we're going to go build a road, right? We cannot just put a sewer in. These are things that you need government assistance, government approval, backing, and sometimes funding. And that's where we get into the elephant in the room, right? And that's a horrible way of me saying this. I'm sorry. Because some people might say that JB Pritzker is an elephant. He's a very large man. That's not what I meant by this. I am not.
I don't know if anybody thought that until you said it, but now
okay. I'm just saying I'm not body shaming him whatsoever. Okay, I'm not. But he has national ambitions. I think it's pretty clear, right? He has a 2028 presidential run on his mind. It's not a secret. He is one of the people that will probably be running in the primaries come 2027 for 2028. Okay. Well, what plays well nationally, right? No taxpayer money for billionaire stadiums. That's what plays well nationally. Republicans can get behind it. Democrats can get behind it. That's what he's seeing right now. But even if the reality, it's far more nuanced. Okay. Even if the infrastructure funding is it's standard practice. It happens everywhere, right? Even if the Bears are paying for the stadium themselves, which is what they are doing, no taxpayer dollars are going into the stadium physically being built at all, right? But for JB Pritzker, it's optics over outcomes. And Illinois fans and eventually taxpayers are paying the price and job losses. And I mean, it's not just the fans. It's going to be communities. They're going to be paying the price. The irony of all this, right? While the Bears are stacking wins, the Bears are stacking wins. They're staring right now at a chance to win the NFC North, a division title. The Packers are now chasing them for once. When have we felt like this? It's been a decade at least. I know the 2018 season happened. It was a blip of abnormality, an outlier that just couldn't be sustained. This is different. It's just different. The organization off the field, though, being told during all of this, not in 2026, not a priority. This is the key to the Kevin Warren letter. That sentence alone, they specifically were told the stadium project is not going to be a priority in 2026, and that's why this letter was released. That disconnect is why this feels so jarring. It's clear, and look, Adam Hogue reported on it. It is clear that inside Hallis Hall, the Chicago Bears, that might have been the final straw. It might have been the final straw.
A lot of people are criticizing Kevin Warren for all this stuff too. And you got to blame somebody when you're not happy. So fine, blame Kevin Warren. I'm sure he can take it. But I totally agree that this is the time to try to publicize the struggle that the Bears are having with this stadium. And not just that, because back when Lori Lightfoot was running this, she said maybe the Bears should focus more on beating the Packers than their stadium, right? And then you actually had a bill being proposed within
the Bears bill.
State Senate. Like, you have to be a winning team in order to ask for public funds. So this is just like, hey, here we are. We're winning. We just beat the Packers. Now, when it was announced, they didn't know we were going to beat the Packers. But,
right.
It's just what the move is. If the politicians are going to play the game, the Bears got to play the game. It's just the way it is right now.
100%. Because let's be honest, if the Bears were, I don't know how the record would stand out, but 6-8, right? If that math checks out, if they were 6-8 right now, right? This letter lands differently,
right?
But they're not.
Right. They're in first place heading into a primetime game against their rivals for the division.
That's where it is. You just bingoed it right there. They just took on the Packers. They took them out. It was a crazy fashion, right? But a win is a win on national television. They have another game back-to-back going against San Francisco on national television. And there's a chance that third game, because it's still to be determined, against the Detroit Lions, if it's meaningful, will probably be scheduled for primetime television.
Easily be flexed into primetime.
Yes. This is the momentum that you don't get back. This is a brand type moment that the Chicago Bears are building right now. And, you mentioned Kevin Warren, and he's taking the heat for this. Guys, Kevin Warren wasn't even in the position when Arlington Heights was purchased. Again, the bid, June of 2021, bid approved September of 2021. Purchase agreement in place in 2022. Didn't close until 2023, January. Guess what? The announcement for Kevin Warren's position was done in January of 2023. He didn't actually start until April. This wasn't a Kevin Warren thing. This was a George McCaskey and Ted Phillips thing. Kevin Warren was brought in to help get it over the finish line. No one would have predicted how, I shouldn't say that. Everyone who lives in Illinois and hates government, the Illinois government and politics and Chicago politics would have told you, good luck, this is not Minnesota. And that's part of the problem. But look, he's doing what he needs to do. And it's possible the back and forth between different, local governments and now different states, it could either be what puts Kevin Warren on the map for his job, or it could potentially be the reason why he's eventually pushed out of his job.
So I got a couple questions for you. I don't know how much you still got that you're hoping to present here, but
I got maybe
a couple questions.
45 seconds worth more of work.
Okay, why don't you go through the rest of what you got for us, and then I got some follow-ups.
Okay, so basically everything that was laid out, the whole point of this is, look, Indiana isn't just noise. The other key part of that letter in Kevin Warren's letter was he said this was not about leverage. We all call bullshit on that. We know that leverage is at play here, right? We do. But the difference is, look, Indiana has urgency. They've already said, come to Indiana, right? They just passed legislature in 2024 allowing other teams to be able to get funding this way, right? Indiana is a timeline. It is leverage, but it's also insurance. This is no longer just an empty threat. We're not just saying we're going to move to Indiana, as Adam Hogue reported, right? Kevin Warren's letter to be released has to have George McCaskey's sign off. And from what Adam Hogue was hearing from sources that I've talked to after the Adam Hogue article, that's 100% correct. George was not on board. This was something that was mentioned years ago, floated out there, ended up being pushed to the side then. He wasn't completely on board. It seems like he is at least willing to make that step if that's what's needed, right? And that's what matters. So owners don't greenlight statements like this unless the option is legitimate. And the timing, perfect. Look, we talked about that already. Didn't hurt the product on the field, clearly, right? But if anything, that win, it amplified the urgency, right? Indiana's fast, aligned, they're ready. Illinois is stalling. And now finally, there could be consequences. This is what frustrates me more than anything. The Bears are finally doing things right. We talked about it in the offseason, all the changes that they did with their offseason plans, how they hired their coach, how they flew people in, first-class things that they didn't do in the past. Look, they got the quarterback seems to be right. The coaching is right. The culture is right. The identity is right. And again, they just beat the Packers in an overtime game that we'll be talking about probably for years. And instead of building around that momentum, the state of Illinois is dragging its feet. Well, guess what, guys? Illinois needs to wake up, because if this team leaves, it won't be because the Bears failed. It'll be because no one matched their urgency. All right. What do you guys think in the comments? Well, let's hear from Bob, but go to the comments. Let us know what you guys think.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as your point about leverage, like, you only call something a leverage play when it's disingenuous. And I do believe that this is an actual play, and the leverage actually means something when there's a real possibility that it's going to come through. So I guess my first question, I guess the questions are kind of related, but like, what really is Indiana offering? Are they offering all the infrastructure and the Bears are still offering to pay for all the stadium, or are they offering money for the stadium too?
So they will not be offering money for the stadium, right? Okay. The Bears are still going to pay for the stadium outright. First of all, Indiana is a more taxpayer-friendly state. You know, if you, it's been many years now that people will literally move to Northwest Indiana, the Garys, the Hammonds, the East Chicagos of Indiana, because the amount of time it takes to get to those places in Indiana is the same as it would take to the places like Arlington Heights, to Schaumburg, right? Like, it's the same. There's metro that's built up that goes down there. So my boss literally works in or lives in Indiana. She said that if they move to Gary, it's 12 miles from her house. I can, feel free to come tailgate at her house if that's what happens, right? So it's not like it's a far distance. It's not like it changes anything other than they're more taxpayer friendly. Their legislation that is set up in place. If they're being serious, and it sounds like they are, and they take those negotiations and they're going to be talking in 2026, I would not be surprised if this move took place. And I'm not saying it is. If this move were to take place and Illinois F's this up, Indiana is going to give them the infrastructure help that they need. I guarantee it.
So, and I guess the other question is, you say Indiana is more tax friendly. Like, what does the tax uncertainty really affect the bottom line? We're talking about a valuation from 33 to 197 million. Like, even with an undeveloped, I'm sure that when it's fully developed, the valuation of the land will go way up, all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, what does that mean for the bottom line? Are we talking tens, hundreds, millions of dollars in taxes a year? Like, how badly could Illinois fuck over, or Cook County fuck over the Bears without tax certainty? And what is Indiana promising that they won't?
Yeah. So here's what's interesting. You have the downtown site, right? Soldier Field itself right now. There's no tax revenue, right? It's owned by the city. It's exempt. The park district doesn't pay taxes, right? So now if you were to move that property to Arlington Heights, which is still within Cook County, I know it, the city itself isn't getting the money, but it's still going into the pot for Cook County, right? $197 million property. You're talking at that point, you're talking tens of millions. When this property is fully developed and it's worth the billions that are in place. Now, look, I don't expect the Bears to own everything. I expect the Bears to probably sell off pieces of the mixed use, the hotels. They're not going to want to own hotels. They're probably going to sell off the retail portion. They're going to sell off the office space, and there's going to be residential stuff there. And they're going to sell that stuff off, recoup their money. But as a whole, for the state or for the county, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue once everything's fully developed.
So I guess kind of my question is, yes, that might be what the taxes are, hundreds of millions of dollars. Like with a fair valuation of appraisal or whatever of it, you pay $200 million in taxes. Right. And let's just say we don't have tax certainty, so that's why we're looking at elsewhere. And all of a sudden, 3 years later, you get a bullshit valuation. Like, how much more? I mean, are they talking $20 million a year that'll be bottom line in taxes? Is it another $200 million to double their taxes unfairly? Like, what is the bottom line?
You're talking like the next revaluation, they just decide to increase it, even though things
the marginal difference of non-tax certainty working against the Bears. What's the marginal non-tax certainty?
The reason it's not marginal though is because the Bears are cash poor, right? So like,
no, I don't mean marginal to like dismiss it as not relevant. Just the difference between the two. What's the delta between a fair valuation and a bullshit valuation without tax certainty in terms of actual?
Without the tax certainty versus, I mean, again, it's going to be hundreds of millions. The delta is probably, I mean, you're probably right when you said 20 to 30 million is probably my guess. I mean, that's just without running numbers.
I guess my point is, I'm not going to hold your word at gospel, but let's just even say,
I'd have to calculate it.
The Bears are going to move. There's going to be fans who see the Bears as moving to Indiana,
right?
Because of the potential risk of tens of $1 million a year, as opposed to staying. And I think there are going to be a lot of fans who don't like that too much, even though for a bottom line for a business, like tens of millions of dollars can be the difference between being profitable and not.
But if the state's gonna continue to hold, whether it's the Bears will sell the site, right? They're just offload it at this point. They'll find a private equity firm and sell it off, and they'll move on, take their losses and move on and put it towards something else. But I don't see Arlington Heights ever really developing it in the same way. So yes, the delta is there. Let's say it's on the high side, 30 million. The delta is there, but really the delta could be what it is now, which eventually is a land only site with nothing there, versus what it could be. And that is hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like, we save hundreds of millions of dollars a year in property taxes at my job. Like, it's just what happens. Like, it's a sad state to see them being held hostage in a situation that they put themselves in, unfortunately. But I don't know. I have really hard time putting much blame on the Bears or Kevin Warren in the situation, knowing what's been going on and being said in the background.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not blaming the Bears if they move out. I do think there's still going to be contingencies of Bears fans who are just going to say, hey, I'd rather you be Illinois, and I don't care if you get screwed over for tens of millions of tax dollars.
Because they view it as it's not my money. They're billionaires.
Right.
And, that's the other thing Pritzker keeps bringing up is the $8 billion valuation that the Chicago Bears have for the team itself. The problem with that, though, is the NFL restricts you. You can only sell 10% share to a private equity in order to raise capital. Well, what's 10% of $8 billion, right? Like, that's not getting you over the finish line. And they also have rules in place with their contract. Like, they have to actually offer that up to Ryan first before they're able to find a second option. But they're already looking into that, right? That's probably also how they're helping fund their $2 billion stadium, because the McCaskies are valued. They're barely billionaires, right? And as bad as that sounds, $1.3 billion was Virginia McCaskey's net worth when she passed away, right? All of their money is tied up in the Bears. Right. They're not one of these conglomerate like billionaires that has a billion businesses that they can just move money around and throw things at things.
Yeah, their fortune is basically equity in the Bears.
Yeah. Right.
So, all right. Well, hey, this is good stuff, Rob. Hopefully people understood what got us here and then exactly what's kind of changed. But again, I can't stress this enough. This is, some of this stuff is very much sourced. Rob is well connected within the Bears community, and believe it or not, that's where this information is coming from.
Especially on the property tax side, like, right? That's I don't have my internal football operations sources like Mr. Gary Rappaport does, but the stadium stuff, the attorney stuff, that's where I have more of my connections. And I just felt like it needed to be talked about because there's not enough people putting out the right information. And I will have an article about this, hopefully going out on Bear Goggles. Might be split up into multiple, but
yeah. I mean, we don't get to go into all the reasons, but I just think people like hating Kevin Warren for whatever reason. So
yeah,
just easy. Oh, I don't like this, so let's just blame the guy I don't like.
Hey, if you want to blame Kevin Warren, guess what? Ben Johnson wouldn't be here because it's on record that he said Kevin Warren is one of the main reasons why he came to Chicago.
That's right.
So that went a lot longer than I expected, but
that's all right. I mean, it was good. We had a little discussion at the end, which added to it, but that's all right. It's good.
That's right.
Good talk.
Go Steelers today. Let's get the Bears a playoff assurance guarantee.
Yeah, let's go. Fuck the Packers.
Yeah, and down with Bob and UFFL.
That's what I'm looking forward to. We're gonna wrap up recording and we're gonna watch football for 7 hours. It's gonna be great.
Same. All right, bear down, guys. Claws up.
It's after Packers always.